I stared at the 2 pink lines on the test, my hands trembling violently. A year ago, I signed a contract to be a billionaire alpha's fake husband. It was strictly business. But now the contract is over, he's gone, and I'm carrying his pup. Here is my story. My name is Leon, and up until 14 months ago, my life was a suffocating cycle of eviction notices, overtime shifts, and relentless anxiety. When my father passed away, he didn't leave a legacy. He left a crushing mountain of corporate debt. As an unmated omega, in a city that preyed on the vulnerable, I was working 3 jobs just to keep the bank from seizing my childhood home. I was waiting tables at an exclusive charity gala in downtown Chicago when my life collided with Damien Hastings. Damien was the heir to Hastings Enterprise, a massive real estate conglomerate. He was an alpha who commanded the room the second he walked in. His scent, sharp winter pine and dark espresso, was potent enough to make every omega in the ballroom instinctively bare their necks. I, however, was too exhausted to care. I was carrying a tray of champagne when a drunk guest bumped into me, sending the crystal glasses crashing directly onto Damien's custom Italian suit. I froze, bracing for the inevitable firing and the screaming match that would follow. Instead, Damien just looked at me. His gaze was piercing an icy blue that seemed to calculate my exact worth in a matter of seconds. He didn't yell. He didn't demand my manager. He just inhaled deeply, his jaw tightening as he caught my natural scent of vanilla and distressed chamomile. And then he walked away. I thought I had narrowly escaped disaster. But the next morning, a sleek black town car was parked outside my crumbling apartment building. A man in a sharp grey suit knocked on my door. He introduced himself as Ohio Bennett lead legal counsel for Damien Hastings. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. He opened a leather briefcase, pulled out a thick stack of papers, and slid them across my scratched kitchen table. Mr. Hastings is prepared to clear your father's entire $2 million debt and provide you with a monthly stipend of $50,000. Ohio said, his voice completely devoid of emotion. In exchange, you will marry him. For exactly 1 year. I laughed, thinking it was some kind of sick joke. But Ohio's expression remained entirely flat. He explained the reality of the situation. Hastings Enterprise was governed by a traditional old money board of directors. Damien's grandfather, the current chairman, was stepping down, but he refused to hand the company over to an unmarried, unsettled alpha. Damien needed a respectable, quiet omega husband to secure his position as CEO. Why me? I asked, staring at the zeros on the contract. Because you are desperate, Leon, Ohio said simply. You have no family ties to exploit the press, no ulterior motives to steal the company, and you need the money. It's a clean transaction. There are strict boundaries, separate bedrooms, mandatory scent-blocking patches at all times within the residence. You will be a dutiful husband in public and a ghost in private. I looked around my freezing apartment at the stack of final notice bills on the counter. I had no choice. I picked up the pen and signed my life away. The wedding was a media spectacle. To the outside world, it was a whirlwind romance. I wore a white designer suit that cost more than my life, and Damien stood beside me at the altar, looking like a prince from a fairy tale. When he kissed me for the cameras, his lips were warm, but his eyes were completely empty. Moving into his sprawling, multi-million-dollar penthouse was like moving into a museum. It was massive, cold, and entirely devoid of life. True to the contract, I was given the West Wing, while Damien occupied the East. For the first 3 months, we barely spoke. We communicated through his assistants. I would dress up, attend galas, smile for the paparazzi, and lean into his side as he played the fiercely protective alpha. He would wrap his arm around my waist, his scent wrapping around me to ward off other alphas, and for a fleeting second, I would feel safe. But the moment the penthouse doors closed behind us, the mask dropped. He would walk to his office without a word, leaving me alone in the sprawling silence. I was nothing more than an expensive prop. I hated it. But worse than that, I hated how my omega instincts desperately craved his attention. By the 6th month, the crushing isolation of the penthouse began to crack the foundation of our strictly business arrangement. The shift didn't happen all at once. It was a slow, agonizing blur of the lines. It started when I caught a severe strain of the flu. I had locked myself in my wing, burning with a fever, trying to ride it out alone. I woke up at 2 in the morning to find Damien sitting in the armchair by my bed, an empty glass of water and a damp cloth in his hands. He had wiped the sweat from my forehead. When I opened my eyes, he looked away, his jaw tight. "Ohio told me you cancelled your fittings. The staff said you hadn't eaten." Damien muttered, his voice rough in the quiet room. "I can't have my husband collapsing in public. It's bad for the stock price." Despite his harsh words, he stayed until I fell back asleep. After that night, the invisible wall between us thinned. We started having breakfast together in the massive kitchen. He began asking about my day. I learned that beneath his ruthless corporate exterior, Damien was crushed by the expectations of his family, haunted by the fear of never being enough for his grandfather's legacy. For the first time, I didn't see the billionaire alpha who bought me. I saw a lonely man carrying the weight of the world. And foolishly, hopelessly, I started to fall in love with him. The climax of our fake marriage came in the 9th month, during the annual Hastings Enterprise Winter Gala. The ballroom was packed with ruthless socialites and corporate sharks. I was standing near the bar when Harry Reid, a notorious rival alpha from a competing firm, cornered me. Harry was drunk, his heavy, suffocating scent of cheap cologne and aggression rolling off him in waves. He leaned in too close, trapping me against the marble bar. "So you're the little street omega who bagged the Hastings throne," Harry sneered, reaching out to trace the mating gland on my neck. "How much is he paying you? I'll double it for a night." Before I could push him away, a low, terrifying snarl ripped through the ballroom. Damien didn't just intervene. He descended like a force of nature. His pine and espresso scent exploded, dominant and furious, suffocating every other alpha in the room. He grabbed Harry by the throat of his tuxedo, slamming him backward into a pillar. The entire gala went dead silent. "Touch my husband again, and I will dismantle your company and your life." Damien hissed, his eyes flashing with raw, unhinged alpha instinct. He didn't let go of me for the rest of the night. His hand was clamped around my waist, pulling me flush against his side. When we finally got into the back of the town car to go home, the air between us was thick, electrified, and dangerous. The adrenaline of the confrontation had stripped away our polite corporate masks. I was trembling, overwhelmed by his protective pheromones. My scent-blocking patch had peeled off in the scuffle. The confined space of the car filled with my sweet, distressed vanilla scent. Damien stared at me in the dark, his breathing heavy, his eyes dark and dilated. When we reached the penthouse, we didn't go to our separate wings. I don't remember who moved first. Suddenly I was pressed against the heavy mahogany door of his study, his lips crashing down on mine. It was desperate bruising and completely intoxicating. All the pent-up tension, the months of stolen glances, and the raw biological pull between an alpha and an omega shattered the $1 million contract into pieces. "Damien." I gasped as he carried me to the leather sofa, his hands frantic as they tore at my tailored suit. "You're mine," he growled against my neck, his fangs grazing the sensitive skin over my gland. "Tell me you're mine, Leon." "I'm yours." I sobbed completely, surrendering to the illusion. That night, he didn't use protection. He claimed me with a ferocity that left me completely undone, knotting with me as the storm raged outside the penthouse windows. In the haze of pleasure and exhaustion, I truly believed the contract was dead. I believed we were finally real, but I was wrong. I woke up the next morning alone on the sofa. The air was freezing. I pulled Damien's discarded shirt over my trembling shoulders and walked out into the main living area. Damien was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, dressed in a sharp three-piece suit, his bags packed by the door. His posture was rigid, and his scent was completely locked down. "Damien," I whispered, my heart dropping into my stomach. He turned to look at me, and the icy, calculating billionaire from the day we met was back. There was no warmth in his eyes, only deep, agonizing regret. "Last night was a mistake," he said, his voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. It was an adrenaline response, a biological lapse in judgment. It meant nothing. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Nothing," I choked out. "The contract remains exactly as it was," Damien said, picking up his briefcase, refusing to meet my eyes. "I'm leaving for London to finalize the European merger. I will be gone for the next 2 months. By the time I return, our year will be up. Ohio will handle your final payout and the divorce papers." "Damien, please," I begged, taking a step forward, tears hot in my eyes. "Don't do this." "Goodbye, Leon," he said. The heavy door clicked shut behind him, the sound echoing in the massive, empty penthouse. He left me standing there, shattered and alone. I thought the worst of the pain was over. I thought surviving the next 2 months alone would be the hardest thing I'd ever have to do. But 3 weeks later, I woke up violently ill. And when I stared down at the 2 pink lines on the plastic stick, I realized the nightmare was only just beginning. The panic that gripped me was absolute, visceral, and terrifying. Sitting on the cold tile of the master bathroom, staring at the positive result, my mind spun out of control. I was pregnant. In the world of alphas and omegas, an unexpected pregnancy for an unmatched omega was a social nightmare. But carrying the heir to the Hastings billionaire empire while bound by a fake, expiring marriage contract, that was a death sentence. I couldn't go to a high-profile hospital. The paparazzi would leak the news before I even left the lobby. Instead, I disguised myself in baggy clothes and a thick scarf, taking 3 different subway lines to a small private clinic on the edge of the city. There, a discreet physician named Dr. Simon Gregory ran the blood work under an alias. When he returned to the cramped examination room, his expression was grave but gentle. "You're about 6 weeks along, Mr. Hastings," Dr. Gregory murmured, handing me the ultrasound printout. "Your hormone levels are spiking aggressively. Your body is calling out for the sire's pheromones to stabilize the pregnancy. Without the alpha's scent and proximity, you are going to experience severe physical distress." "Where is your husband?" "He's traveling on business." I lied, my voice shaking as I traced the tiny, imperceptible bean shape on the glossy paper. "He needs to return," the doctor warned, "for your safety and the pups." But Damien wasn't returning. He was in London, ignoring my frantic texts and forwarding all my calls to his legal team. The silence was agonizing. The penthouse, once just a lonely museum, had become a sprawling, echoing prison. As the weeks dragged on, the physical toll of the separation ravaged me. My natural vanilla scent soured with distress, and I barely had the strength to keep food down. I lived in Damien's discarded shirts, wrapping myself in the fading remnants of his winter pine and dark espresso scent, weeping into the fabric until I passed out from exhaustion. Then, during the final week of the 12th month, the true nightmare began. I was lying on the sofa when the private elevator chimed. I sat up, my heart hammering against my ribs, desperately praying it was Damien. Instead, the heavy oak doors parted to reveal a man whose presence immediately suffocated the room. It was Wallace Hastings, Damien's ruthless grandfather and the reigning chairman of the board. He was flanked by his right-hand fixer, an imposing scarred alpha named Victor Harrington. Wallace didn't bother greeting me. He walked into the living room, his cane striking the marble floor with sharp, menacing cracks. He stopped a few feet away, his cold, calculating eyes scanning my pale face and trembling frame. "You look pathetic," Wallace sneered, his thick, peppery scent of burnt ash rolling over me, deliberately oppressive. "But then again, you were always nothing more than a stray dog Damien picked up to play dress-up. What do you want?" I rasped, instinctively crossing my arms over my slightly rounded stomach. Wallace chuckled a dry, grating sound. Victor handed him a sleek leather folder. Wallace tossed it onto the coffee table. The words "annulment" and "non-disclosure agreement" were printed in bold black letters across the top. "Did you honestly think I didn't know?" Wallace mocked, leaning heavily on his cane. "I've had Victor tracking Ohio Bennett's movements since the day my grandson brought you home. I know about the $2 million payoff. I know about the fake contract. I know Damien has been playing the board for fools." The blood drained from my face. "If you knew, why did you let him do it?" "Because Damien was getting too powerful," Wallace stated coldly. "He was modernizing the company, pushing my old allies out. I needed a reason to strip him of his shares and legally remove him from the bloodline succession. A breach of the company's strict morality and fraud clauses is the perfect weapon. Tomorrow is the annual shareholder meeting. Damien's 1-year mark hits at midnight." Wallace leaned in, his eyes narrowing into vicious slits. "You are going to sign that document, Leon. It states that Damien coerced you, abused you, and forced you into this sham. You will testify before the board tomorrow, destroying him completely. In exchange, I will deposit $5 million into an offshore account, and you will vanish." "I won't do it." I spat a surge of protective Omega instinct, overriding my fear. "I'm not going to lie to destroy him." Victor Harrington took a threatening step forward, but Wallace held up a hand, his smile turning cruel. "I know you visited Dr. Simon Gregory's clinic 2 weeks ago." Wallace whispered his words, hitting me like a physical blow. "I own the building that clinic operates in. I know you are carrying a Hastings bastard." I gasped, stumbling backward until I hit the edge of the sofa. "If you do not sign that paper," Wallace promised, his tone dead and absolute, "I will freeze your accounts. I will have Victor drag you out of this penthouse with nothing but the clothes on your back. And the moment that pup is born, I will tie you up in a legal battle so severe you won't even be allowed to look at a photograph of your child. I will take it, and I will erase you from existence. You have until tomorrow morning to make your choice." They left, taking the oxygen in the room with them. I collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. I was a cornered animal. Wallace had all the power, all the money, and all the leverage. I was just a broke Omega from the wrong side of the tracks. But as I sat there wiping the tears from my face, the despair slowly hardened into a cold, unbreakable fury. Wallace thought I was a desperate, helpless victim. He thought I was just a pawn on his corporate chessboard. He severely underestimated what an Omega would do to protect their unborn child. I didn't pack my bags. I didn't run. Instead, I walked into Damien's locked home office. I had spent months watching him type his master passcode. I booted up his encrypted terminal. If Wallace wanted a war, he was going to get one. Using my stipend money, I had quietly retained the services of Jonathan Carmichael, a legendary forensic accountant my father had once desperately tried to hire before his bankruptcy. I had been planning to use him to secure my own financial independence after the divorce, but now I had a different target. I spent the entire night tearing through Hastings Enterprises' internal server, sending encrypted files to Jonathan. I wasn't looking for Damien's secrets. I was looking for Wallace's. The atmosphere inside the Hastings Enterprise boardroom was suffocating. The massive mahogany table was surrounded by 20 of the wealthiest, most ruthless alpha executives in the country. At the head of the table sat Wallace Hastings, looking like a king ready to execute a traitor, and at the opposite end sat Damien. When he had walked into the room moments earlier, my breath had hitched from where I was hidden in the adjoining observation suite. Damien looked terrible. His usually immaculate suit hung slightly loose on his broad frame. There were deep purple bags under his eyes, and his icy blue gaze was fractured, hollowed out by an exhaustion that seemed to reach his very soul. His scent was muted, tightly leashed, but beneath it I could smell an overwhelming undercurrent of grief. "Let us bring this meeting to order," Wallace announced, his voice booming across the silent room. "We have a severe matter of corporate integrity to address. It has come to my attention that our acting CEO, Damien Hastings, has committed extreme fraud against this board, the shareholders, and the legacy of this family." Damien didn't flinch. He just stared at his grandfather, his jaw tight. "Get on with it, old man." Wallace's eyes gleamed with triumph. "Your marriage is a sham, a purchased contract. I have the signed annulment documents drawn up, and your so-called husband is waiting in the wings to testify to your coercive, abusive manipulation." Wallace pressed a button on his intercom. "Bring the Omega in." The heavy double doors swung open. I walked into the boardroom. The entire room went dead silent. Every alpha eye turned to me. I wasn't wearing the baggy disguising clothes anymore. I wore a tailored, sharp black suit. My head was held high, and I deliberately let my scent, rich, sweet vanilla, mixed with the unmistakable heavy spice of early pregnancy, flood the room. Damien shot up from his chair clattering to the floor. His eyes widened, his nostrils flaring as my scent hit him. He crossed the room in 3 massive strides, completely ignoring the board. Leon Damien breathed his voice, cracking his hands, hovering over my shoulders, as if afraid I was an illusion. You're... "I'm here," I said softly, holding his gaze. "What is the meaning of this?" Wallace barked, slamming his hands on the table. "Leon, give them the testimony. Now, tell them what he did to you." I turned slowly to face the chairman. The fear that had paralyzed me the night before was entirely gone, replaced by a ruthless, burning clarity. "My husband has done nothing but protect me," I said, my voice echoing clearly off the glass walls. "The only fraud in this room, Wallace, is you." Wallace's face turned purple with rage. "You stupid, insolent little—" "I didn't sign your NDA." I interrupted, pulling a thick, sealed dossier from my briefcase and tossing it directly into the center of the mahogany table. "But I did spend the night with an independent forensic accountant named Jonathan Carmichael. He found the Cayman Island accounts, Wallace. The ones where you've been siphoning the company's pension funds for the last 8 years to cover your catastrophic losses in the Asian real estate market." The boardroom erupted. The executives lunged for the folders, ripping them open. The color instantly drained from Victor Harrington's face as he backed away from Wallace. "That's a lie." Wallace roared, his authoritative scent cracking into something rancid and desperate. "He's a lying, gold-digging street rat. He fabricated those documents. They're heavily encrypted bank ledgers corroborated by internal wire transfers, requiring your specific biometric authorization," Damien said, stepping in front of me, his body acting as a physical shield. His voice was no longer hollow. It was lethal. The dominant alpha energy rolled off him in a suffocating wave, driving Wallace back into his chair. "You've been stealing from the people who built this company to line your own pockets. You wanted to oust me today, Because you knew my modernization audits would uncover your embezzlement by the end of the fiscal quarter. Damien turned his blazing eyes to the remaining board members who were staring at the documents in absolute horror. Security is already escorting federal authorities into the lobby. Chairman Wallace is to be detained immediately. The board is dismissed. It was a bloodbath. Within minutes, the room was cleared by corporate security. Wallace was dragged out screaming threats and profanities, a broken, humiliated tyrant, stripped of his crown in front of the very empire he tried to steal. Hard karma had finally come to collect. When the heavy doors finally clicked shut, leaving us alone in the ruined boardroom, the silence between Damien and me was deafening. Damien turned to me, his chest heaving, his blue eyes searching my face with a desperate, agonizing intensity. Slowly, hesitantly, he dropped to his knees, right there on the carpet. He pressed his face against my stomach, his large, trembling hands gripping my hips. "You're carrying my pup." He choked out a raw, broken sob tearing from his throat. The cold, calculating billionaire was completely gone, leaving only a terrified, heartbroken Alpha. "Leon. My God, Leon." I looked down at him, the tears finally spilling over my eyelashes. "Why did you leave me, Damien? If you didn't hate me, why did you walk away that morning?" Damien looked up, his face wet with tears. "Because of Wallace." He confessed, his voice trembling with self-loathing. "The night of the gala, after I attacked Harry, Wallace pulled me aside. He told me he knew I was falling in love with you. He told me that if I didn't stick to the contract, if I didn't let you go the moment the year was up, he would have Victor arrange an accident for you on the icy roads. He threatened your life, Leon." I gasped, covering my mouth with my hand. "I couldn't lose you," Damien whispered, pressing a desperate kiss to my stomach. I thought if I broke your heart, if I made you hate me and left for London, Wallace would leave you alone until the divorce was finalized. I thought I was saving your life, but I was a coward. I left you unprotected, and I missed this." He looked back up at me, his eyes pleading. "I don't care about the company. I don't care about the legacy. I only care about you. Please, Leon. I know I don't deserve it, but please, let me be a real husband to you. Let me be a father." I looked at the man kneeling before me, the Alpha who had sacrificed his own happiness and broken his own heart just to keep me breathing. The anger and the betrayal that had poisoned my veins for the last 2 months finally dissolved, replaced by an overwhelming, unconditional love. I reached down, threading my fingers through his dark hair, and gently pulled him up to his feet. "The contract is void, Damien," I whispered, cupping his face as he leaned heavily into my touch, our scents finally blending together in perfect, permanent harmony. "We don't need it anymore. We're already real." He kissed me, and for the first time since the day we met, there were no cameras, no lies, and no deadlines. There was only us, and the beautiful, undeniable truth of our forever. And that is how a $1 million lie turned into the most beautiful truth of my life. Taking down a corrupt billionaire and fighting for the Alpha I love was the hardest thing I've ever done. But holding our newborn pup makes every tear worth it. What did you think of Wallace getting exactly what he deserved? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more crazy, real-life romantic dramas.